I couldn't get to where I was supposed to go to.
That's
Good.
good.
So if the hackers are trying to get me, they're do a good job.
Oh, we did have that once at a former job of mine, an employee, because it said, oh, I'm in a meeting, I can't do this. Is there any way you can grab a couple of these gift cards for employees? And it actually happened. So it's
My
unfortunate.
wife's company. it
They're
happened.
getting good.
My wife's company had happened. They said, can you send me all the W-2s of PDF? And they charged us something because of the owner.
Right.
Like, yeah, sends you off, and then all of a sudden, hey, did you ask after the fact?
That's tough.
Nope.
Well,
No,
and they usually figure out who, because they come from the town manager. So they usually figure out who, and the person's like, you're busy, you're doing a million things. Okay, sure.
They look for the busy ones.
most people nowadays, I think, well, today, a lot of people call me, said, hey, they just get this strange email on you, like, don't click it.
Hopefully, we're all learning.
Don't click it. Well, the thing is, if you look at it, it looks very legit. The only thing
Yes.
that's wrong in the email is it says that the envelope expires February 31st.
Yeah, I saw that, yeah.
That's the only thing that would tip you off. Because there's
So
no-
it was external then, it wasn't
Yeah.
somebody.
it was
Thank
somehow.
you sending me spam.
And trust me, I had to change my email, I had to shut my other email down.
Did you really?
I assured him you were on it,
Just
that you
email
had
one.
notified everyone and we were all,
But the tough thing is,
Good to go.
with your Google, everything is tied right to your Google account, so. I get 10 years of emails.
Multi-factor authentication or an APM. Multi-factor authentication, it shuts everything down. It shut mine down.
Oh, did it? That's good.
too close to you.
No problem.
Step it back a little bit.
Oh, it shut yours down with. Well, I tried, like it blocked the access for it. So because I had multi-factor authentication set up, and since it couldn't authenticate it, it shut it down from me even trying to access it.
Oh, good.
Oh, then that must be what happened to me as
Yeah.
well, because I couldn't access.
It's good.
I even sent it on, so you couldn't access it either. So Scott got twice. Maybe you didn't buy local going.
Yeah, well, thank you. How are you, Mary?
Right.
And I've had no problems with any. All right, let me know when you're ready. Yeah.
Ready when you are. All set. We're online, we're on Zoom and YouTube.
No. All set? All right. Call to order Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. Do the first item of business on the minutes from last week. You have
Everything looked good to me. I'll move that we accept them as number two.
okay, second that. Any other discussion in the minutes? All right, roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Cliff, aye. Okay. Minutes approved 3-0.
Just like to mention, even though I'm taking minutes, I'm not the secretary. Of the clerk.
You haven't been officially dubbed said title.
No, and I do not want it.
So we haven't done that thing yet.
All right, I've been posting the minutes, so
It might stick, Cliff, if you get the official title.
okay, this we can bring up
Ready for the
estimate.
superintendent?
Yep.
I'm not sure Lynn's gonna want to sit next to me, so. Get a cold today.
All right. Let me share my screen here for those folks who are watching online. If you give me just one moment to do that.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, ready when you are.
All right, let me just take a quick sip of water here.
All right, good evening. My name's Ernest Rule. I'm the Superintendent Director for Aspet Valley Regional Vocational School District. Joining me this evening is our esteemed Berlin representative, Lynn Ryan, a long-term representative. So thank you, Lynn, for continued support, and thank you to this committee and the residents of Berlin for their continued support of Assabet in its programs for its students, and of course, any community projects that we can participate in. Tonight, we'll give you our FY26 approved school committee budget. Now that we have the governor's numbers, we will present to you our FY26 budget plan, which addresses strategic planning, some initiatives and the needs addressing our multilingual language students, social emotional learning, and mental health. FY25 this year, as we talk about our budget, this is perfect. With our superintendent's director welcome, the budget FY25 as of October 1 continues our trend with having all in-district students within our freshman classes. Currently within the budget, our foundation numbers are all based on the October 1 number each year. We have 1,086 students that are in district. The total is 1,194. So the difference right now in the district, there are 108 out of district students that are left in the district. At one point in time, when I started to come before this committee, we had about 800 in district students. So we've seen a potential very large growth, and that's part of why we're seeing the budget continue to trend in this way. And I believe we have probably one more year with this kind of large increase, as 47 of that 108 are seniors. They will be graduating in June this year. So we'll see another probably 60 plus in districts as of October 1, 2025. For Berlin, you had an increase of 7 students from our October 23 number for this past October 24, which brings you to 44 students total. And that's an enrollment share of a 4.8%. This budget overall, as it tries to help us get back to pre-COVID times with the addition of a phys ed health teacher, and then an English language teacher as well to help our large increasing population of MLL students, shows an increase of an 11.1%. Partial of that too is that, if you recall, 1.6, I'm still on that slide, but
Okay.
I'm jumping around all over.
No problem.
1.6 of that is from a reduction of out-of-district tuition revenue that was put into the budget, as we're now not collecting that out-of-district tuition revenue. And as I mentioned last year, it's not a sustainable way to calculate our budget. This budget is at a net school spending of 100%, which the state requires. The challenge with this budget is that our school transportation contract came in. I had talked about it in December that we hadn't received bids yet. We were still in the process. We received 1 bid, 3 inquiries, 1 bid at 37% increase. And that's a 3-year +1+1. So we have a 3-year contract, and then the district has the ability to go into an extra year, and then a 5th year if we so choose, or after the 3rd year, we go back out to bid. Part of that is that we have 4 additional buses that were added, because as you can imagine, with the in-district population of students going up, we hadn't added buses in the past several years. What we've had to do is double up on bus routes. So we have a number of our bus routes where they'll go and they'll pick up half of the route of students, say Marlboro, for example. They'll bring the kids early to school at say 6:50, drop that group, and then go and do the second half of the route. Because at one point we had, well, they were trying to have 77 high school students on a bus. And that doesn't really work when it's supposed to be 52. If you had elementary school students, you could put 3 to a seat. High school students don't fit 3 to a seat. So part of that is the buses. Part of that is a new GPS system that will be part of the busing, so parents can track where the buses are when they're students. And then updated cameras, which is through Wi-Fi on the contract. But unfortunately, we only had one. So although we fared better, I think, than some of our ascending towns at 50% and 51% and 80% of what their contracts were, the fear for us was that we'd go back out and wouldn't get any, and then, or you potentially would get higher, because then they know that nobody else is bidding. So we were kind of stuck with the 37%. At this time, healthcare, we still are waiting for data claims, so we don't have an idea. But we have heard through the GIC that it's anywhere between 10 to 14% increase. Assabet has been lucky where our data claims have been low, right at the optimum range of 83 to 85%. And we're hoping that after, actually, we have a meeting Monday, that the last month drops off, which was kind of high, and then we'll have a good full year of low claims. The other piece is, so our health insurance, just a reminder, is 75-25. Any folks that were hired prior to July 1st, 2019, and a 70-30 split for anyone hired after that. In the budget, we're also allocating $100,000 towards OPEB, which at one time we were doing $35,000, which again, it will never get us to the goal. But I think that's probably what our max will be as we continue to go forward. And that's it for that first slide. So, because I was detailed, I can probably fly through some of these other ones. In the FY26, we're giving you a figure, and that was based off, our best guess. And so this slide shows you what the state funding came back at based on the number of 67 in-district students as of that October 1 number. So our numbers for in-district students went up. Chapter 70 funding came in at $1,235,187. The minimum local contribution, which are the assessments that the state says that our member communities have the ability to pay, went up $1,393,850. And then the transportation aid, which right now in the governor's budget is funded at 95%, was a $35,070 increase. Just a side note on the transportation aid, Maria Silver had budgeted $1,910,000 as a just best guesstimate of what our percent for transportation came up. And the contract came in at 1.96. So she was $50,000 off, and then, or 50,000, and then with the 35,000 that we're getting back from the state, it's an additional 15,000 that we have to kind of find, but that's worked into the budget. So overall, the state funding that they're saying was a $2,664,107. You'll see overall the budget's going up a little over 3 million, which is about a $292,000 difference that we've added with above minimum assessment. Page 2, if you go to, that's just the topic slide. Page 2 is our snapshot of the operating budget. You can see the overall increase of a $3,056,267. The 11.1 directly associated with those 67 additional in-district students. And of course, the out-of-district payment going back into the operational budget. The capital debt assessment is the renovation project, which drops $55,000 each year when the debt service payment for 26. So the operating budget and the capital debt is the $30,614,095. And we'll get into other slides, which kind of breaks that down for you to see a little bit better.
Which is the one place that, one of a couple of places that I disagree. That 11.1% increase, the operating budget is a reflection of the cost to run the school. The fact that there's 67 additional in-district students, it doesn't matter if they're in district or out of district when it comes to the operating budget, but we went through this before.
Page, any questions?
No.
Page 3. Just shows you some of the budget drivers. These haven't changed from when I presented back in December. Again, strategic planning priority with teacher staff diversity, long-term facility planning, as we have an abundance or oversubscription of students wanting to come to Assabet. 300 seats with approximately just 550 or so applications. 457 of those are in district. The remainder are out of district. Obviously, with building capacity, it would become more cost to our communities. So we're mindful of that as we look at which programs. What we're finding is it's not necessarily looking to add new programs, although that's always something that we look at on the table, what could benefit the area. What we're seeing is we're seeing a large oversubscription of some of our hard trades, electrical, HVAC, plumbing, carpentry, in which this year for electrical, there were 68 students that chose electrical for their first choice, and they can only take 28. So 40 of those students had to then hopefully maybe get their second choice and then the third choice. So that's part of the talk when we look at expansion, is maybe not even adding a new shop, but maybe adding to those programs that have such a high subscription or interest. But it depends on square footage and amount of teachers that you have, things of that nature. We're in the early stages of that, but we are looking at it. I talked about the MLL students, and also special education costs. We have our special education numbers have decreased over the past number of years. However, we're seeing students with higher degrees of special services needed. And so we have a 24% population of students requiring special ed services. However, the amount of services those students are requiring tend to be higher. And those costs are included in the assessment to our communities. There's no additional cost for that. Trying to think. And then obviously with type of educational program that we have, the consumable costs, right, for steel and copper and wood and things of that nature, consumables that you can't necessarily reuse again. I will tell you though, a lot of the welders and the plumbers do quite a bit with what they can with steel and copper, and they'll cut copper down to the smallest piece, because you can solder, you can solder a small piece, you're pretty good because you have to be able to control the heat, right? So they do work on some of those consumables, use them to the highest degree, so there's not waste. Next slide, please.
So Ernie, what does MLL stand for? I forget.
It's MLL is multi-language learner.
Thank you.
So it went from
I knew
EL
that.
to ESL to now MLL. And I'm sure within the next year and a half or so, it will change again. Yeah, that's okay.
If I could ask too,
Sure.
what was the percentage of students that are on some type of IEP?
It's 24%.
24%.
And that's 25% actually. It's 25%. So that's an IEP or a 504 accommodation.
4 or 5. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Page 4. Anything to add, Lynn? So these are the two staffing adjustments that we talked about, the phys ed instructor, and then it's an ELD, English language. I can never remember what the day is, but it's an English language instructor for our high MLL population. Next slide. So these are the enrollment changes. Again, they haven't changed since December. That's the breakdown based on all of our Chapter 70 funding and how the MLCs are worked out. And then it also shows, you'll see in slides how your percentage of enrollment breaks down through member assessments in some of the upcoming slides. So you can see Berlin right at the top there. Last year we had 37. And for October 124, it went to 44. So there was an addition of 7 students. Okay. Page 6 is just our definition of the statutory method of assessment, which is outlined in our regional agreement on how or the methodology used by Assabet for our member communities for their assessments. And then the next slide, page 7, is the MLC, which is just a definition breaking it down even further. So to have folks understand what does minimum local contribution mean. It's also known as the aggregate wealth model. which is basically statewide based on 50% property wealth and 50% local income wealth. Next slide. It gets a little more. Yeah, this is just again outlining the resource of the House governor's budget, which is usually released the third week in January. If you were to click on that link, it would bring you to, I wouldn't do it now, but click on that link, it brings you to the state site that you can actually search any district, regional or town in the state. If you go to the next slide, page 9, this is a new slide we didn't have before. It's a little bit difficult to see because it's small, but on the left-hand side, you'll see up at the top, that's the Chapter 70 summary for Aspet Valley. 801 is our LEA number. And on the left-hand side is basically the breakdown of how they get to what our Chapter 78 will be. Those are all the components that go into it. If you look at the right-hand side with the comparison to FY25, you'll see that currently in FY25, those numbers were based on the enrollment as of October 1, 2023. We had 1,019 students. On FY28, it says 1,083, and then it shows 64 students. Now, if you recall at the beginning of my slide, I said 67. So the additional 3 are 3 school choice students, in which they may reside in one of, they may have been placed to reside in one of our member communities, that are either a student that is homeless or is in the care of DCF. And because they reside in one of our sending districts, if we have space as a vocational school, they may place them with us. However, if they were at another vocational school, which I know there's one in Wakefield, we have a student that is living in one of our member communities. I won't say where, but they're being bused to Wakefield, Mass, to Northeast Metro Tech every day, because the only place they could find housing for that student was out in Westboro. But their schooling is still happening in Wakefield. So what happens with that is we get Assabet gets the bill from that other vocational school that then pay for the cost for that student to attend. They don't receive, because obviously Wakefield can't get foundation money from the state, because that's not one of their member towns. So it ends up being on our rolls. So that's why 67 listed. However, in the foundation money, it's listed separately as 64. So that's where the school choice, and I can show you, or actually you'll see the breakdown. There's nobody from Berlin that's in that school choice. Okay. So you can see on there that it talks about the numbers. The Chapter 78 is 11,083,000. That's 9668. But you'll see at the bottom, required net school spending of foundation, we're at 100% again. That's at the very bottom of that right side. It says 100% net school spending. Next slide, real quick. So this is a slide Department of Ed has not updated this yet, but I show you just as a this is just a comparison. If you look at the required net school spending, if you look at FY23, where are we? FY23 found to the far right, right? It'll tell you what the budget and net school spending should be, percentage as required. If I'm on FY23 and I'm 3 columns over from the right, budgeted as percentage of required. All right, on the very top, you'll see that our member communities in yellow, and then in the blue below is Assabet and some other regional voc schools similar to our size. We were actually at 97.6%. Budget required, we were below the 100%. You can't be below 100% in FY23, but we were. So what happened was in FY23, what they say is in order to make it up, or percentage wise, you need to be above that, right? So whatever you're below in the year prior, so if we were below 100% this year, next year we'd get a letter from the state saying, hey, you haven't met your net school spending. So now, not only do you have to meet whatever your net school spending is for next year, you also have to make up the difference in that next year.
Hmm.
even though you may not have budgeted for it.
What would
Um,
cause that? You're just being too darn thrifty.
Yeah, thrifty, or you're either, sometimes it's even reporting on how you're reporting your end of the year report and things not being put in perfect categories.
Okay.
We had a situation where there was some reports that weren't completed on time,
Okay.
and the way the money, if certain reports don't get submitted, the department holds your funding. Funding comes in late, and then it gets added, you've already closed the prior year. All of a sudden, then it gets added to your next year, and you say, hey, wait a second, this was from, and it depends on the Department of Revenue, and of course, those agencies don't really talk to each other. So there's no like saying, yeah, no, this is true, we ended up sending this to them late, but it should have been actually, on the books for the prior year.
Which drove up our E&D, which
Right.
we ended up giving you folks back money.
That was the year at the end.
Yes.
I remember
Yep.
that. Okay.
So, yeah, there's a lot of things that come into play, so we're mindful of making sure we're meeting net school spending. The only thing I'll say is, you know what, a lot of folks will say, well, what can you cut in your budget? Because we are right at the threshold, and I'll share Berlin Boylston on the top, right? It says 155.2% is where they're supposed to be. And yet they're budgeting at 175.5. So, there's some room to be able to, that was in FY23. That has nothing to do with whatever they're doing this year, but that just goes to show, right, where potentially budgeting is. We're not, if you look at even, I think it was Southborough, Westborough. Which one is it?
Southborough was 192. Was that?
Yeah, well, Westborough's 153. No, that's not the one. 168 would be Northborough, and then they have a 201% about budgeted.
Oh, wow.
So the budgeted is basically what the towns say we're going to invest into education with our community. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad number, right? It's just what they can afford. We tend to build our budget based on, the revenue we come into to meet our member assessment. So we're right at 100% net school spending. So next slide, and this hasn't been updated, so you have the latest one that we had. This is the minimum local contribution. This one we made it a little bit of an upgrade as we put boxes around the current year, so you didn't have to struggle so much to see what was what. On the left-hand side, you'll see FY26. That's the number of students, right? That's 1,083 in district population. You can see Berlin at the top with there with 44, increase of 7. If you move to the right under FY25, you can see the dollar amount, and then in FY26 in the box to the right, 739, 795. So you'll see that what basically the Chapter 70, what they said was you have the ability to pay an additional $141,886 based on those 7 additional students. I know there was a question because I had shared another slide with Kristen that was similar to this, but it actually had our stuff in Berlin Boylston's, right? But those are 2 separate numbers.
Right.
So they do show a calculated altogether. And again, this is all public information that's out on the web if you were to look. I just wanted to make sure there was no confusion that these are just our 44 students from Berlin attending. Okay, next slide. Any questions so far? All right, so this is the money slide I like to refer to, which basically is a snapshot of our entire breakdown. So the very top local contribution is at 739, 795. In the yellow far left, you'll see Berlin at the top there under net busing. If you look to the far right, that 1,055,456, that's the remaining amount after our regional transportation reimbursement, which we're going to see in a couple of slides. But that's the difference, which, let's see, what do I have here? Which we're getting 914,654. So that's the difference, which moves to our member communities and is broken down by their percentage. So that's a 42,762 dollars. That's your portion of the transportation. OPEB trust fund is $100,000 broken between our 7 communities, $4,052. And then the capital improvement fund, that's the stabilization fund that we implemented last year when we funded for the first year last year. That again is at a 250,000. So Berlin's portion of that is $10,129. That above minimum assessment is $56,943. And then the long-term debt service is the renovation project. In our 10th debt service, $62,155 is Berlin's portion of that. So the total FY26 assessment would be 858,893 students. And if you look below that, you have the student enrollment, school enrollment. 43 of our 9 through 12 students, there is one post-secondary student, which gives you your total of 44. And if you look further over to the right, there's a third column there, school choice. You'll see the communities in which the school choice students are, 2 in Maynard, 1 in Westboro.
And those are students that Assabet pays for.
Yeah, so we end up getting a bill for those students. And then those particular towns are the ones that get assessed for those school choice folks.
Got it.
Yeah, those are costs that are associated with Berlin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, just to be clear on which direction the money flows.
Yeah, so.
It comes and it goes.
Yeah, so every year, Assabet, in either May or June usually, votes whether or not to participate in school choice as a school that receives students that want to come to Assabet from any community that, if we had space.
Mhm.
We obviously don't have any space, so each year we vote no to school choice.
Mhm.
But this is going from the opposite direction,
Yes.
where they're the school going out. They're already enrolled with school, but because of their personal circumstances, they may be placed at a different residence, but maybe attending a different school. So.
Do you ever come across students that want some discipline, vocational discipline that you can't get? Assabet,
Mhm.
and they say, oh, can I go to Minuteman? Do you ever get that?
Yeah, actually, we do. And there's, believe it or not, there's only, well, there's 3 schools that students wouldn't have to go through our exploratory process for. So exploratory is a method in which the freshman students, when they first come in, they get to see all 16 of our technical programs, and then they pick 6 of their very top choices, and they go spend a week in each. All of the agricultural schools, if the students want any agricultural program or landscaping type program, they don't have to come to Assabet at all. If they wanted to go to Minuteman for carpentry, then they'd have to come to Assabet.
Got it.
We had a call from one of our largest Senate school districts that said, hey, I have a student that wants to go to Essex. They've been accepted because they wanted X, Y, and Z. But I'm denying it. Like, well, in this case, you can't deny it because we don't offer that program. Yeah, but what about exploratory? And then I had to explain it on that when it doesn't work. Even from the standpoint of landscape management, we used to have it. Minuteman has landscape management. We had to basically allow a student to go to landscape management at Minuteman because that was something they recently had changed. They hadn't allowed it before when it was like a one-off. It had to be part of an agricultural school. But that was a recent change that had happened. So.
And before we had plumbing, we had at least one student from here go to Minuteman.
So that school choice cost comes to Assabet and then you assess it to the town, the originating town.
Yep, and then we end up having to pay it out to that other school. It's just between school and school. Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure.
So is it anytime a student wants any type of vocational education, because we are part of Assabet and they come to Assabet first, you try to place them, they have to then go out. You have to basically sign off on it for agricultural or something else that's.
Not even know. It's directly through the state. So those are part of the regulations that allow them to be able to go directly to that.
Like
And
Norfolk
yeah,
Aggie.
Any of those, Smith Agricultural,
Essex.
Norfolk Aggie, Essex, any student in any part of the state can go to any of those, regardless
Yes.
if
Okay.
they're part of, because there's only 3 in the
Okay.
state. Yeah. It doesn't always work well. There was a pretty popular issue a few years back where a student was from Barry, Mass. That was going all the way to Norfolk Aggie. And the transportation alone was $44,000.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. it would.
So,
It's a long
but
drive.
the way but the language in this law was they had to, Barry had to pay the bill. They since had a state legislator, amend that, so the cost isn't as high, but there's still a cost to member communities.
Yeah, well, and the reason I asked was because in my former town, Leicester, we had a student go to Norfolk Aggie and it was over $100,000 between the tuition and the transportation.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
Don't doubt it.
yeah, it was crazy.
and it's funny because it's different, where we have where our regional agreement is. Essex Tech is, their budget is approved by the state. They have a whole board of trustees. They don't go through this process. It's part of state government. Yeah. So this is where we are with this slide. Next slide is just breakdown of the capital debt assessments. Again, FY 26. You remember in FY 16, we borrowed 27 million as the bond payment. 1.1 million was the principal. Interest on that is $602,875. It reduces by $55,000 each year. It's paid on July 1st and January 1st each year. If you go to the next slide, page 14, I believe it is. This is the capital debt assessment breakdown of the 3-year average. So if you notice that, 4.1% is what your enrollment, but your 3.3-year average for the debt assessment will always stay at 3.65, regardless of where your number goes. And that was done when the renovation project was approved. So some great fiscal thinking on part of my predecessors in the school committee at that point. So you'll see that reduce each year, and that's reduced by $2,007 for FY 26. Page 15 is the debt schedule, assessment schedule, so you can see exactly what it's going to be for each year. There's only 15 years to go after next year. I look at the bright
I like the
side.
optimism.
I do too.
Except for that yellow line is in the schedule.
Yes, that's right. To show you,
Relational.
that's just to show you where the.
Yeah.
Middle there.
That's right.
Hold your eye right in, you
Yeah.
can see what's important.
Exactly right where you are.
Need all of-
Page 16, operational revenue plan. So this is kind of all the numbers we've talked about in one spot for us to look at. The very top, and we've highlighted these boxes in blue of the FY 26. Top right, under the projected revenues for 26, you'll see there's the chapter 78 from the state at 11,083,668, with the difference from what we received in FY 25. There's the Berlin number of 739,795. If you look down to the Aspet District excess and deficiency revenue, that is at 400,000 this year. So that's a reduction of 50,000 from the current year. 400,000, if you notice, there's no out of district tuition listed in that area. That's where it normally would have been. The interest income is 150,000 again, and then the Medicaid reimbursement, it's kind of a moving target. We always leave it at 75,000. That's really based on the student population that come in and what type of services that we can actually bill out for and get reimbursed. So that's kind of a bit of a moving target. You'll move down to state reimbursements with the transportation aid. There's the $914,654. With the $35,000 difference. And then your above minimum assessments there, there's the 119,098. That's the busing, OPEB and capital stabilization and the debt service payment.
So
Um,
earning on the transportation, is that based on the number of pupils from each town, or is it something else that you? Or is it-
Yeah, on the transportation, that's based on a number of pupils, but it's also based on what percentage this is one of Lynn's favorite points, based on.
I can ask Lynn.
You
but no, I mean-
You're doing a great job.
More friendlier version.
Okay.
So it's based on a percentage that the legislature, if appropriated, when the school was built, it was sold that all of the regional schools that were being built would be 100% regional transportation reimbursement, and then the two.
Subject to
comma,
appropriation,
Subject to appropriation.
Hmm.
Uh,
and they just don't appropriate it.
That's
That's right.
So they have gotten better in the past number of years, but it had been.
Well,
like
we've
when I
got
started-
two organizations, and I think, MAVA, I think MASBO, I think MASS,
Yeah.
MASC, and Mars have all fought
Yeah.
for full truth. So we're getting close at this year, but we never know from year to year what the
Right.
percentage is gonna be.
What it's gonna be. And then, of course, when you have bus contracts that go up
Yeah,
37 to 50%, you can't, no matter what they're doing, it's not gonna really help us. There are actually there are actually school districts that I'm aware of that are trying to look into what it would cost them if they just gave their parents a stipend to bring
Yeah.
their kids to school. That it might be actually cheaper.
well, I think the administration and the school committee made the right decision not to go out again to bid.
Hmm.
We had one bid. It was up 50%. All of our neighbors are up at least 50%.
Hmm.
Some are going out to bid again. And I don't think they're gonna fare too well because if the one bidder knows there were no other bidders, they can bid higher the second time around.
Sure.
So I think we did the best we could, but it is a big increase.
So if you're looking to start a business,
Yeah,
this is
right.
the one to get into.
I tell you.
Some schools are even looking into doing their own busing, but that's a whole other ballgame.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah, and then the other thing to consider too is the state just passed, which is a good thing, the new law about having cameras on the outside of buses so they can film any cars that pass buses that are stopped with their lights on so there's an additional cost the bus company is gonna end up picking up because that will be it's technology that doesn't exist right now.
Can I ask a question? What do bus companies say is driving the increase? What's the primary driver of their increase? It's not gas prices, surely.
No, I think part of it is
Bus
Wages?
drivers,
staffing.
Wages?
It's staffing, yeah. Yeah, right now, we're not, our particular group of folks are not union bus drivers. I know in the our last contract negotiations, Marlboro had a huge push for their bus drivers all becoming union. Ours did not. They did come and they tried to ask the committee to allow it, but we didn't go for it. And they're making $34 an hour, so it's not, cheap money. But I just think we've had with Assabet, we have had, our students aren't working up in the thing, are they?
No, not your students.
they wouldn't be over us.
No.
I hope they're not. Yeah, I know. But
Well, I
no,
think one of the things too is the age of the buses, because
yeah,
we put into the contract that they can't be more than 7 years old?
more than 8 years.
More than 8.
8 years or no,
So the equipment is more expensive.
so the equipment,
Their buses.
Yeah. yep. Yeah, and I think, like Lynn said.
I was
this-
just curious.
From the part of staffing too, we've had a number of long-term bus drivers that decided not to come back this year. And they've done the routes for 12 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And so you can't, it's hard to replace. In the beginning, it was very difficult. They had people filling in, people doing the routes backwards, student, normally gets picked up at 6:45, is still outside waiting at 7:25. The mom's calling saying, I don't think he missed the bus, but the bus wasn't getting there until 7:35 because the guy had done it backwards. Working closer to the school and then coming out to Berlin. So.
One of the most calls that the school committee gets is about busing.
Mhm,
Well, I remember I'm a former principal, trust me.
mhm.
Where was
Buses were
that?
not my favorite.
You got all the calls.
That was certainly not my favorite task.
Town hall starts to get them too. When there are problems and people don't know where to call, they end up
Sure.
at the town hall sometimes.
My parents always seem to know who to call.
schools.
Me.
And I will say too, I think even the company itself, the bus company has had some staffing turnovers
Mm.
with some key people. who
Yeah,
made it.
About how many average hours does a bus driver usually do a week?
I think that's normally a 4-hour minimum. So they do 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon.
Okay, so 20 hours a week.
Yeah, and then they can pick up, that's just to and from school. So then you've got all your athletic events,
right.
you got field trips, we have 4 o'clock buses, 6 o'clock buses. So those are things those are all part of that contract as well.
Thank you.
But we only get reimbursed for the from and to.
Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna go back to the list of member towns here.
Sure.
And how did you figure out the allocation? There's, like the percent increases, this year's
Yep,
allocation.
That's all based on the slide that had multicolors at the bottom based on their enrollment.
Okay, so what we're looking at the,
So see on the bottom down there? So you got 100% of the population of 1,086 of total in district.
slide 16.
Yep, so if you look over to the left, though, see the 4.1% is Berlin's share of that total amount. If you're looking on that slide, what you're looking on, yep, and you look to the far right, that percentage to the far right is the difference from 25 to 26.
Yes,
So your combined, your 56,943 and 62,155 on this slide right here
yeah,
is your total on that bottom blue slide right there that you're looking at. Yep. If you look at the Berlin and the,
so I think these are expenses and I'm looking at operational revenue plan. Which page?
no. So this is your assessment. So this is the revenue. This is what the district's bringing in. And then you're looking at the revenue plan. So that's just taking all those numbers from there. And all the numbers from the multicolor slide and putting it on this slide. So now what you're seeing is the assessment to the towns at the top to minimum local contribution. And then bottom are above minimum community assessments is down below. So we break them down as this is what the state's requiring you to do.
Yeah, okay.
And then down below is the member community assessments that are above the minimum, but they're required by the state.
And those numbers are driven by the pupil count, the student count.
All of those numbers are driven by the people count. Yep. Based on how many students you have here. Yep. Okay. So if you go to the next slide, this is the expenditure by function. So I'll explain to you how some of these things work. So under administration, we see we've got an increase there. That has to do with, I know it says administration, but there's IT software and hardware that's included in that. We have an SIS system that we're switching over from iPads to PowerSchool. So that's a large percentage increase of about $80,000. Under instruction, you have special ed increases. Like I mentioned earlier, any types of services that students require, whether it be special hearing devices, additional tutors, one-to-one type things, specialized transportation for special ed fall under that category. And that also has a holding point of a contractual increase for contractual obligations. That's a $606,730 increase total in that. We have one of the things that a little unprecedented for Assabet, which is not a bad thing, but we have 3 students that are currently in the building with that require wheelchairs. In the past, we had maybe 1 every 5 years. But now that's specialized transportation for each of those students because they can't get on a regular bus. And of course, that's usually 1 person on a van that we get the total cost of the van back and forth. So that can drive the cost of transportation up. Medical health, that's actually a reduction of 13,000. That's because of some new hires that we were able to hire at lower costs. The pupil transportation is that new bus contract with the 4 additional buses. That's a $517,230 increase. Transportation. Athletics, that's $55,000 increase due to the hockey rink rental. contract, which has gone up. We use Naven, which is right in Marlboro, state-owned rink. However, trying to get ice time and usage of that rink, it's
Other than at 3 o'clock in the morning.
it's expensive, but it's not as expensive as the other one that's in Marlboro. That's privately owned and operated. So, yeah, so that's a little bit difficult. Other
It's
student,
closer.
yeah, other student activities, that's a $7,300 increase. That's for Skills USA. There was some, usually what we do is we use Perkins funding, which is a federal funding program to help fund that. Skills USA is basically the Olympics for career and technical ed students. So they can compete against other students across the state in their field of expertise, or there could be leadership events. We currently have about 136 students that will be competing at districts, which is our local competition to see who will go on to states, which is in April. We have operation maintenance, $86,871 increase. That's due to a custodial contract service. We've had a number of folks that are out due to medical or personal leaves, and trying to find somebody to temp hire, very difficult. So we have a contracted service company that we're using. That nice thing is, no matter what, if someone's gonna be out, there's always somebody in that person's spot. And that's for regular custodial cleaning, so it's not like they have to know certain areas and have any kind of learning curve once they get started. Our insurance of active employees, that's the $1.6 million that got moved from out of district tuition into the operational budget expenditure.
This is the one that fortunately, this will probably be the last year that the business office manager and I will disagree as to how this should have been handled. Because they were paying it directly without a district tuition. Now that that's going away, they're paying it now in the budget. So this 1.6 million is not really new money. It's money that we paid in a different way that we are going to have to bring back into the
I'm
operating
familiar.
budget
I'm
again.
familiar with that.
If you remember, I had 2 years ago,
Yeah.
I had a real problem with doing this, but
So the money was always being spent, it's just that it was.
it was the way it's being paid.
Yeah.
I remember the regional, just, we had to deal with that when I was. on-
So 1.6 million of the 3+ million
Mhm.
is really just moving the money from one place to the other. So while there's an 11.1% increase in the overall budget, as you see it here, I
We were always
disagree.
spending it anyways.
We were spending it anyways, and it's
Yep.
really not that much of an increase, the 11.1%, when you take the 1.6 out, although the administration calls it a 1.1. Right, Ernie?
Or 11.1.
11.1, I'm sorry.
If it was a 1.1, I would have been done already.
No, but of
You would have been like, we're good.
the 11.1, better than half of the 3 million was just moving the money back into the operating budget.
I totally get
Yeah,
that.
I
that's,
remember that there was a separate slide for it because it kind of
Oh.
bypassed the budget.
And then we got a
process.
separate page that
Yes.
showed
Yep.
what they were paying.
Yep.
What I consider off the books,
Yeah.
okay?
yeah, I mean, as a reminder, when I started it, we were paying 5.5 million without a district tuition. And that was, we had the opportunity to, because you only had 800 students here,
Uh-huh.
right? Not the 1,083.
Mhm.
This is all a result of several years ago when we had some difficulty changing personnel and some reports that didn't get filed on time and you got money back.
Yep.
And the budget got lowered, so it looked like it was really going much higher the next year.
Yeah.
That's all a result from that, but
Yeah.
this is the last year, so I'm thrilled.
Yeah, we
Because
couldn't see it
from
left
now-
out, yeah.
From now on, the increase will in fact, to me, be the increase.
The actual, taking more students from district, that was something to do with some state legislation or that stuff that
Well, it was-
changes standards or something
Yeah, it
about.
was a couple of different things. I think they're actually So they had talked about changing the regulations for admissions because some folks had claimed that vocational admissions were discriminatory in nature. And that because of the selective criteria, it ended up excluding disproportionate classes of students. So what Aspet did was, we took it upon ourselves to be a leader and had implemented this lottery process that was only in effect if you have more than more students than the number of seats that you have available. And we have there is some minimum criteria, selective criteria. But now there's no issue with whether it's disproportionate. Next Tuesday, the Board of Ed is going to take up revision to the regulations, and that they're proposing a selective criteria that only allows attendance and discipline, is what the state's going to be pushing, and we're already there, so we don't have to do anything.
It's interesting to listen to the subcommittee and to the State Department of Ed when they talk about the one member of the committee didn't want interviews as part of the criteria because her son was phobic about that and didn't attend the vocational school. So it's interesting to listen to how they view things.
And so those, that is not listed as in the new regs. There's no interview and there's no, we also require a letter of recommendation, but from any non-family member. So it doesn't have to be just a school counselor. It can be a troop leader, it can be a coach, it can be a pastor or a priest or and they don't like that either.
In their discussions, they were talking about the recommendation of the sending school from the guidance counselor or whatever. And they said, well, that isn't a good thing to do
Indicator,
because of it depends upon the relationship between the guidance counselor and the student. And I'm thinking, these people are professionals, I don't think if they like a student that they're going to send them to the Voc school because they like them. I think that, but anyway, that's the kind of conversation. You should listen in. It's really interesting.
I don't have any trouble imagining. Maybe either some.
You're having some
I've heard
PTSD.
that conversation.
Some PTSD. So yeah, I think it was between that and then also we had done some rebranding and with the Do More, Monica, and we had seen a increase in interest from our member communities. When I started, we were lucky if we got about 167 applications from our in-district communities.
Really?
And now we're getting 457. So, it's been a little bit of different change.
Has there been any especially the non-member district communities?
Yeah, we've been asked by Shrewsbury, Clinton, Sudbury, Foxborough, Carlisle, if we're interested in having additional members join. Believe it or not, Carlisle, because what happened was when the Minuteman redid their building and built a new building, they had to redo their regional agreement. It was the only way it would get passed, and by doing so, they gave people the option to get out, so they wouldn't have to take part in the building. Well, so that's what they did, including the current place in which the building sits, which is in Lincoln, and now there are no students from Lincoln that attend Minuteman. Sudbury, because they want to come here, or Boxborough. Acton is part of it. It's kind of like the Berlin-Boylston thing. Acton is part of Minuteman, but Boxborough is not. So the Acton kids get to go, but the Boxborough kids do not. And now every vocational school. I think the other thing was when Governor Baker was here, he really pushed vocational education and the importance of it and how it impacts our workforce development and economy in the state, and had put a lot of money into it. I think just saying that, given that recognition, I think people kind of stood up and said, "Oh, okay, well." And then of course COVID, right? We had the ability to be open where a lot of our schools were not because of our space and the way we were able to, with one building, build cohorts. We saw a sharp increase of applications that year, as did the private schools, right? Because they were all open, Catholic schools. So yeah, I think it was a number of things, and just the talk that, you know, you don't necessarily need a college education to go get a job right away. I always have to remind people, because they'll say, well, why do you send all your kids, why do you send so many kids to college? Right? And I usually say that at Aspet, we prepare students for options after high school, right? Because a lot of our fields now require you to go to college, biotechnology, health tech. You know, but even in the carpentry fields and in plumbing and HVAC, those folks want to become their own, architects or their own business owners one day. So they may even go just to get an associate's degree in business, right? Just to run it. But
Sure.
unfortunately, the way in which we have to report it on DESE, it's either work, college, or military. That's your three options, right? So the kids, I'm going to college. Even though it may be part-time and they're working full-time during the day, they'll still go, I'm going to be going to college. So I'll mark that. You know, sometimes it's just the student for the first time has learned that they are smart enough to be able to go to college, and they may be the first in their family still.
And a lot of kids at Assabet get credit for some of the classes that they've taken at Assabet towards their degree program at a community college or even at a state college. So they have a leg up. And I think when they see that it's not going to be a total 2 years, that maybe they've got 6 months in as far as their credits, or even a year in, that they're willing to go to the community college.
Yeah.
I think, Scott, there's also an underlying trend here that I do a lot around the city of Worcester, and this is a big topic. The Worcester vocational, the competition to get in, and one of the comments about it is they're going in and they're going to college, and they're taking seats from people that don't want to go to college. That's one of the, I mean,
The give and
it's-
take, yeah.
take it or leave it. It's just things that I've listened to, people talking about that phenomenon. So I think there's a general increase in going through vocational training in the high school years.
Yeah.
It's a multidisciplinary
just think it's up.
education that you don't necessarily get, like, you know, when I 25 years ago went through the public school system, unfortunately, at that time, it was the kids who couldn't hack it in the public schools that went to
Right.
vocational schools. And I always
The end of
thought,
the hall.
right, and I always thought there were so many neat opportunities there, but it wasn't packaged at that time in the right way. So it seems like my generation, the late millennials missed that opportunity. And now
Very different.
it's very, very different. I think it's great that the kids are having those opportunities.
Yeah.
Is anybody talking about trying to, open up more vocational schools or forming their own
Yeah,
districts?
so
or-
what's happening now is the current administration for the current governor and lieutenant governor, they're looking to expand and kind of build on to what Deval Patrick and Charlie Baker actually started. However, from their lens, they're looking at innovation pathways. So part of, like Kristen said, students in high schools, right, that they Department of Ed has come out and said that at part of education, students have become engaged, elementary, middle school, but at the high school level, they're not as engaged, they're not seeing the same engagement rates. It hasn't followed the trends of elementary to middle school. So the way in which they're doing it is they're creating what they call these innovation pathways, which I will probably call exposure versus what we provide, which is experience, because it's 100-hour program. It may be called an advanced manufacturing program, but it's only it's 100 hours in length, and it may be in a room about maybe half this size with maybe 3 or 4 machines, and then they're claiming it. So they'll go get and they'll learn and spend a little time on each. And then they'll go out and they'll job shadow, but it's 100 hours. But there's also a couple college classes tied to that. So they call them innovation pathways. Our students, when they go through a chapter 74, will earn anywhere between 1,800 to 2,100 hours and earn industry recognized credentials like OSHA, ServSafe if they're in culinary. If they're welding students, they'll get Mass Highway D1.1 and D1.5, which is building and bridge welding certifications that can weld anywhere in the state. So those are the things that they're not getting. The state's pretty crafty because they've created the frameworks which basically are like our academic frameworks, but for vocational schools, they've created them a way in which the innovation pathway for anybody interested could take them. And if you have an empty classroom and you want to have a computer programming and web innovation pathway, you can implement it. And there's an online certification that after 100 hours, students can get a certification saying that they've completed, C++. It doesn't necessarily mean they've experienced how to actually implement it or use it, or the scenarios, or have the opportunity like our students up in your building here that, right, doing the changes that they have. They may go and visit a site, they may build some dog houses or bird houses or things of that nature, It's interesting when the state talks about this example of project-based learning, they always use a kindergarten or elementary school story about kids that, went out to a park to look at a bench. And they were going to be building a bench to be put out in the school. They never mentioned that vocational schools are already doing it.
I think it's a new thing.
This is just, it's okay.
I'm part of a couple of things that we're doing. We have about 60 kids that come in each year as freshmen that aren't reading at a 6th grade level.
Mm.
And we have a special program and a teacher for those students.
Mhm.
Within 2 years, they're 95% of the kids
Mhm.
are reading above a 6th grade level.
Mm.
We had a chart. There was even one student that was reading at a 2nd grade level.
Mhm.
So I'm thrilled to see that they're addressing the issue of kids not reading at a 6th grade level. You can live life reading at a 6th grade level. You can't live life reading at a 2nd grade level.
Mhm.
And the afternoon programs that we're doing
Mm.
for the workforce. Because we have, and I'm sure if you've gotten the Assabet After Dark in the mail, did you get one?
Catalog.
Okay. You can see that there's like auto collision and a bunch of programs that we're doing
Mhm.
that basically it's coming out of the unemployment line, is it not?
Yeah, it's through the state Commonwealth Co-op, as well as through Mass Hire. It's all funded through them. The nice thing is they are folks that are unemployed or underemployed, and then they opened it up to any student that potentially didn't get into a vocational school that graduated from an academic school. They would they'll be eligible to take these 250 to 400-hour courses. So if there were students from Boylston that didn't get into Assabet in their high school years, they potentially could go at night and take those courses. So they are opening up opportunities. Obviously, I'd like them to give me more money to expand, but we also have to be mindful that in some instances, we would potentially ruin our high school and some of our Sunday communities because we have so many of their kids coming.
Oh, I was surprised to see the cost of some of them. It's like $6,000. But
Yeah.
then you have to realize that a lot of that's being paid with grant money from the state.
Yep.
To, through the unemployment.
No, there's usually no cost to the individual
Yeah.
that's in those. And there's potentially gift cards when they finish, they get $250 gift card to like Lowe's to purchase their own tools. They have the ability to use some of the money for if they need, they have transportation issues, they can get a card to use for Uber or things of that nature. So the state's really stepped up from that standpoint.
So I cause us to digress, but those are a couple of things that I'm kind of proud of.
Yeah.
It's very
They're
well-rounded.
wonderful stories of things that are happening.
Mhm.
Even the baby VOTEC with the innovation. That's wonderful too, because you
Yeah.
never know what will spark someone, right? I
No.
think that's part of it.
That's good. And then just the last two quick things on here, other insurances, just student and building, our insurances for, obviously if students are out working on co-op type things and outside campus projects. And then our building insurance, that went up $35,000, $35,164. And then capital fixed assets is our technology purchases, $80,000. We have a number of years back, 3 years, 4 years. It was after COVID, so might have been 4. We started to go with leasing for our technology equipment, because what had happened is in the past, we had purchased outright. And then what we were noticing is that we had computers at 8, 10 years old, 12 years old, in programs like design and visual communications. And that, you know, as soon as you get a new computer in that field, it's already obsolete because they've already, you know, light years ahead, even with AI, right? And that's changing. So now that we lease, including all of our Chromebooks that the students get, after 4 years, the student comes in, gets a brand new Chromebook. When they leave as a senior, that gets turned in. And then the new freshman coming in will get a brand new computer. So it was a little bit more expensive up front to get it started, but now we know that our technology is not any older than 4 years old. So it works well. And that's really the increases on the expenditures. And
The timeline.
the timeline, kind of. How this road, you guys are the first stop on the official FY 26 approved budget roadshow.
Well, we're alphabetically at the beginning and then we're a very special place.
That's right.
Very
I'm
special.
in Hudson on Monday.
Where they spend real money.
Well, I mean,
It's nice to be looking at our piece in this budget and say, "Oh, it's not so bad. It could be like,
and
it could be
Yeah.
liberal."
Hudson, they had a 50% budget plus contract increase to last year, so.
Yeah.
It'll be a bit of a challenge. That's with the select board. I don't meet with the FinCom over there until like mid-March or April. So. Any other questions? I guess I'll just add and say, obviously, we're working on the community project, which I know my electricians have been over here. I was over here with Wayne and some of the students in carpentry when they were, you know, trying to move some of the stuff in. I got a glimpse of I can't think of the fire chief's first name, but he had
Mike.
he had his dog
Yeah.
yeah, that was there with the kids, and I got some gold pictures which I'll post shortly, but they were, you know, in Wayne fashion, getting prepared to get all the stock closer so he could then have it stacked, and he's got the whole just the staging area out there with the two Conex boxes and the roof over it, so if it's bad weather.
Well, it's a great project because it helps the town save some money
Huge.
Yeah.
and it's good for the students
Yeah.
because they get to work on new construction, really.
Yeah. And I think they actually, you know, because they sat in on a meeting, I don't think Kristen told me that she had called a meeting and talked about the HVAC system and didn't expect 15 students to be there as well.
They got to meet actually my dog Cameo.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking we were having a small in-office meeting and there were 15 kids, so now I get stopped by some of the students in the hall, where's your dog, where's
Oh,
Cameo?
yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah, really, but it's a perfect match. I really can't, you know, thank you guys enough for the opportunity. It's something we literally would never have been able to otherwise do. And it creates a vibrancy in the building to
Yeah.
have the kids in here and they're just, it's so full of life up there. It's
good.
awesome to see. It's really, really great.
Yeah, once they get going, you may actually see some video. You may get requested to do an interview at some point. Our under the direction of Bill May, our design and visual students from the audio video production. They do this thing called Nailing It. It's a kind of an HGTV type show
That's
where they'll track it throughout, and they'll, you know, at some point you may hear some of the electricians singing. Yeah, they had them on camera last time when they were in Southborough, doing their work, and they were singing while they were putting their doing the work. But yeah, they may stop you at some point to do an interview about, you know, the project and
absolutely.
get you on Assabet TV.
Hey, it's okay. We'd be a little more famous even than, you know, Berlin YouTube. So, hey, why not?
Great.
But we actually have been in contact with our state representatives too, and, you know, inviting them to come out. Lori Trahan, through the ARPA funding, put a significant amount of funding into the project, as well as our state rep and senator contributed a state earmark for $40,000 for this year to the project. So, you know, we've invited them to stop in, come and see, and then we want to do a formal, you know, ribbon cutting ceremony when everything is all
Yeah, that's
said and done. So really
Fantastic.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's great. And I hear our HVAC folks, even though they haven't been in the building yet, right, have
Yes, we are,
right-sized the.
that they
System, you
actually,
mean? Okay.
right, otherwise it was gonna be about a $300,000 or $400,000 system is designed by the mechanical engineer, and this is sort of kind of what happens. I'm now learning sometimes when you
Yeah.
sometimes things can get designed in a standard way for a larger size building or sort of what the industry standard is. And it can work on a simpler, smaller scale that's gonna save us money and it's going to give the kids the opportunity to be able to do it as well. So we're working on simplifying our design.
That's it. Excellent. Well, as always, if you ever need me to come back and whatever, I'm happy to visit. Well, if you have questions, please reach out. And Maria Silva was unfortunately unable to come. She's actually out on medical leave, so we wish her the best. We do have a interim Jean Savoy that's been working with us to get the budget done. So
We
you've
were
been,
fortunate to pick her up
Yes.
because she has been the business office at Neshoba Tech and a couple of other places, so she's got good experience.
Yeah.
To help us, because we don't want to have happen what happened the last time we changed business office managers, which was the off the books.
yep.
All right.
You guys have been very
Thank you.
good to us, and I thank you very much for your support over the years.
Absolutely.
Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. All right.
It's good, always thorough.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Have a good night.
Have a great night.
Governor's that cold.
Yes.
Okay, so we have, our next meeting is actually with the select board on Monday.
Yes, it is.
I did post the meeting, though there's nothing other than just the room numbers listed from the, being here, there's nothing for Zoom or anything like that. It's posted, at least of this morning, in the select board one, so I'll.
It'll be posted tomorrow, so actually, Madam Chair and I have our Thursday AM call, and it'll be posted by 3 PM tomorrow of the meeting, so I can get you the Zoom link to put on the FinCom agenda.
Yeah, if you could put,
Yep.
or what I could do on there, because if you say it's not until 3 o'clock, I had to post that by 7 o'clock, and that 4 hours, who knows what I'm doing. More likely I'll remember it at 10 o'clock tomorrow night.
Fire off a quick email, so that way we make
Or
sure.
if there's something I can put as a placeholder, or you can just say, look at go to the select board
Absolutely.
for the links. I don't know what would be the proper way.
I'm gonna connect you up with my assistant Dee, and we'll get that all.
Or if they could just
squared
paste
away.
it into that, because I think whoever has privileges up there, you get privileges on everybody's. I
Okay.
don't think I don't think I'm restricted to the finance committees. When
Yeah,
I edit, I think I could edit anybody, so that means if she pastes it into there, she could just paste it into ours.
I might be able, I think I may have access to both, so I may be able to do that. Not a problem. I'm just gonna send an email to remind all of us.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Otherwise, it is posted minus that.
FinCom agenda. Okay, perfect.
I still have a question regarding Julie's position. Is she still officially on the committee? Or has she resigned officially?
I do not know about that. The only,
Because I'm marking her as absent.
there's
And I can answer that for you. I ran into her today. She has not officially resigned.
okay,
Which is probably a blocker to you getting another person on your staff. Because you don't have an open position technically.
okay, so I will,
Reached out to the moderator. Moderator has not been back in touch with her.
okay. She just needs to send an email, or I think provides update to Eloise, right?
It's, Julie doesn't need to get permission from the moderator, she just needs to send a written.
Right, she needs to send in her resignation, which she has not done
Right.
yet, according
Okay.
to this one.
And that can go both to
Eloise.
Barry and Eloise, because Eloise will, as the official record keeper, will note that.
And I'll mark her as absent again this evening.
Okay. All right, so I'll go to send one line email to Eloise, because that's all we need is, so that'll be officially done.
That's perfect.
And I mentioned before is
Send it.
the other person that was has indicated she won't be able to join. So I guess the other question would be too, is if, considering how late we are in the process, would Barry want to have somebody come in that's gonna be making votes that's missed almost everything too?
But one, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, considering we do have at least have 4 people, it's not like we were down to needing a person to get a quorum. But it leaves us open still for, the capital planning, which I think is next week. Is that when they're?
Seventh, I believe.
Right, so it's next week, Thursday.
Is that coming up already? Oh, goodness.
So we don't need a decision now, but
Well, next week.
I think, Mary, you had already indicated you can't do Thursdays.
Right,
Is it-
yeah, I can't do the capital thing. I can't do Monday, the 24th.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll see, we have our meeting on Monday, we have a meeting on Wednesday, so we can see, what we can come up with for that. Now with the free cash, when are we gonna know the official number? Will they know the number for the 27th?
I don't believe so, unfortunately. So I do need to reach out to Anna on that. We're close, but the Schedule A is due the end of February, and there are the couple of other documents that have to be submitted. The balance sheet also has to be submitted in order to get free cash certified. So I'm not certain that everything will be certified by the state in time for the 27th. So I will also reach out to Anna and just have a conversation with her about that.
Now, other than, certifying me at this stage, we must be able to at least give them a general range to work off of, right? There must be.
Yeah, so we have gotten, so as part of the process that we've been going through, and I just got on Thursday before I left, the estimated revenues, so for FY 24. So that is actually going to be helpful for us to go off of, and that was on the local receipt side. I will follow up with June on the free cash estimate as well. But
So, then I'm assuming if we have zero number for the 27th, to them, it's almost again useless for them to meet
this is true.
again. But if we have at least, no, I'd say we have to be someplace.
Oh, yeah.
We have to have some level
Me
of confidence
too.
that we're not sitting there going, it's like, oh, we're plus or minus 200%.
No. I think
Um,
it's just, and the financial team likes to be precise, so.
Yeah, I know that can
very
be precise, but
different process,
yes.
so it's getting to that place where they feel comfortable enough to release that number, knowing that it could be plus or minus a little bit. So I will
Yeah.
speak to June. I will be back. Actually, I'm coming in tomorrow. And for Monday night, I will also have my recommendations on the budget, which I've put in, and I plan to present to both the select board and the FinCom at the same time on Monday. So that way I figured that would be beneficial. But as you saw from 2 weeks ago, I think it was, or 2 weeks ago, it's definitely looking like still override and debt exclusion. So it's, it's going to be a challenge to see what we can do. As I said, we only have that 1.2 million in the excess levy capacity. And we're still at least $1 million in operating overages after we met with Berlin-Boylston last week. And I believe we're still at close to $1.5 million in capital as well. So that's the challenge, with the understanding that that capital number can fluctuate, but I'm still not seeing how we're going to get from 2.5 million down to at or below 1.2. So I just have some grave concerns about, in one sense, taking up all the excess levy capacity, but also potentially additionally having to look at override beyond what we have for excess levy. So that is my main concern. And as you've seen in the breakdown that we have, we really only have about less than $600,000 in new revenue. And I've confirmed again with the assessor last week, she's still not comfortable with me moving more than $200,000 at this point for new growth. She's going to keep looking at it as the months continue. And we're going to pick up a little bit in local receipts, but again, it's insignificant. It will be less than my estimate right now is less than $100,000. So really that chunk of new money gets eaten up by town, Assabet, and a little bit of the district, but certainly not anywhere near $2.5 million. So we have some really difficult conversations that we need to have. And I've actually gone through in my recommendations, which I haven't really done in the last 2 years. There are no step increases. There are no supplemental requests recommended to be funded right now. And I've actually scaled back and recommended below some of the department requests at this time where I felt that potentially we could do that on the expense side. And we're still a long way from being balanced. So,
Yeah, and with Assabet, you saw it here, it's the state mandate and
Yes.
our numbers, that's not really movable.
it's per
And it's a
pupil
very
driven.
transparent budget, so.
Absolutely, and I like
There's
the,
nothing to-
the process is very straightforward
Yeah.
here when it's a per pupil assessment with the
Yep.
state. And you
Yeah.
see they're not funding substantially beyond minimum local contributions, so.
Whole different process.
Whole different
It is.
processes, right, yeah.
It is, and not to say that the need isn't there, like we've said, I understand it, but I think we need to step in some of those needs more incrementally, for BBRSD, because there's just, I mean, there's no way that we can fund them.
No, has anybody been in touch with, I know this is a vacation week right now that we're in the middle of, but has anybody been in touch with our counterparts in Boylston? Do we have, Scott? I don't know if.
No,
Not
what
yet.
I was gonna ask is, we talked about that last week of
Yep,
setting up a meeting with the select, a member from the select board and.
I plan to
Yeah.
reach out tomorrow. I've been away since
Yeah.
Friday morning. But I plan to reach out tomorrow and try to get that set up. So that's on my to-do list.
Are you,
think
are
they'll
you
be
technically
helpful.
on vacation?
I am, but not right now, but I am.
I saw you out of
I was
office.
up on the mountain today. First time in 21 years. So
Good for you.
it's pretty exciting, but yeah, with my stepson.
Cool.
So we have him for the week. So, yeah,
Cool.
but no, I mean, we've got to get ready for Monday night. It's budget season.
Right.
It's his two
Right.
favorite words. He knows. I always say, because what time of year is it? It's budget season. So we all know. But yeah, so I'll be in
Thank you.
tomorrow and we'll be getting some of those loose ends tied up for Monday night. And that's one of the things on the list.
You know, I clearly heard the interim superintendent last week say that they needed to go back and look and sharpen their pencils. So they're clearly, I mean, the presentation after they did their presentation, your presentation of where the budget stands as a whole, clearly gave them the information and picture that they needed to have.
Good. Okay.
I-
And we're sharpening too.
Yeah,
So,
no, I understand that. And I'm glad to hear that as well. But I thought the way that unfolded was really powerful.
Mm.
It was.
And they saw it. And you could see without seeing that they understood what the fiscal challenges are for the town. And, to what degree that can inform their decision-making moving forward, I don't know. But it's clear they knew it and that they understood it. And that acknowledgement that we have to sharpen our pencils means something. So, I'm encouraged by that.
Well, yes, it's definitely improvement over the last couple of years. So,
definitely.
Different worlds, Scott.
yes, so regarding, I know typically, usually I think it'd be next, this week even, is the warrant, when's the warrant close?
Warrant closes Monday night.
Monday night?
Yep.
Okay, and so if there was anything to do with that exclusion override, when do those decisions have to be made?
So,
And they're made by the select board, I
right.
understand, right?
So that's a great question. So in my mind, those tag along with the budget. We already have a placeholder for the budget on the warrant. So those would go along with. It's something that we need to have a broader discussion with at the select board level. The only reason I can only do a placeholder for it right now is because the school will not be taking their vote on the final budget until March 11th, as they said when they were here. So I do have a draft list of articles at this point that is on there along with the budget. And should we not need it, we can always take it off.
Makes sense.
Yep.
But yes, we're prepared from that standpoint, if that's the direction that we need to go in. And I have reached out to our financial advisor already, with Unibank, put that on their radar, asked them about, saying that we may need to break it up and figuring out what actually can go on, the qualification for a debt exclusion. The nice thing about a debt exclusion is anything that qualifies there is, temporary, not permanent. As you know, an
Yeah.
override is a
Mhm.
increase permanently,
Mhm.
in excess of 2.5%. A debt exclusion is for however many years you take the debt out for. So
Got it.
Yeah.
that's why as many capital projects as we can make that can be financed over, say, 10, 15, 20 years would make sense to go into the debt exclusion, because you're not going to have a permanent increase to your levy.
I think that's the right way to
Yes.
look at it, right strategy.
That's absolutely right.
That's why I think we need both.
Yep.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, if anything needs to be going with the debt exclusion or even override, those are decisions exclusively made by Berlin voters. And there's nothing in the step in the process that ever allows, Burleson voters to, chime in on that. Am I correct?
That they would have to do their own, based on what happens with regard to their budget. Now, if the budget were to fail twice and we get to that super meeting, my understanding is we are still ultimately required to vote as Berlin on our override and our debt exclusion,
Correct.
even though we may at some point come to a joint district meeting over the budget number as a whole.
Right, they can't force us to go over our levy limit. The Burleson voters cannot have any voice in having us go over our levy limit.
That's
Likewise, there is no voice in any debt exclusions we do. If anything fails in any one, likewise, we don't have a voice if they have anything that they have to do debt exclusion or override on their side.
that's correct.
If one side fails, then, well, I don't know what the rest, but basically it comes down to is it's.
We have to figure out how to pay for it. They have to figure out.
Right, and there's no money to pay for it, with a failure was there, in Massachusetts, is there any rules on if a override does fail, that there's a minimum of time required before you can bring another override?
I don't believe so. I can check into that,
I
but
think that's a really good question.
yeah, I don't
think.
think you can on that same topic, but you could bring one for the following year's budget.
Well, yeah, I think like next year, but I think there's rules that I know many states, have that if it fails, you just can't, come back 6 weeks later.
For the same one, you mean?
And do the, right, well, for an override.
I don't believe.
I'm not talking about,
I-
because last year was the budget. I mean, if we do get to the
Yeah,
override.
that's a good question because I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyways. In the community in which I have a second home, 2 years ago, they had a 2.5 override because of the school budget. And it failed. And I believe they had another meeting in the summer. And it was the same question.
On the same year's budget.
I think so.
Okay, let me look into that.
My memory could be faulty, so,
No,
but when you were talking about it, I'm thinking, wait a minute, didn't they have another town meeting and have to vote on it again?
I will look into it because I know that I have not gone down this road. I don't think we've gone down this road because of the excess levy capacity. So I think it's important to know
It's a good
all of
question.
those answers.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm sure there's going to be, if we do need to go route, and because of the uniqueness of just trying to do the budget last year, a lot of people will probably make the assumptions like similar of the way the process is, but if it override or debt exclusions get involved, that's not a combination of the towns coming together and where Boylston gets a place to raise our debt limit, our levy limit.
No, and in fact, when June was talking, and I think it was last year when we were debating this similar topic, there was one year where Boylston voted they didn't vote to fund the full amount and it came down and they had to come down for Berlin as well. So they can't force us up. If anything, if
Right.
we
Well,
came
those were,
down,
right, that was failing on just the budget number.
Right.
Not talking about an override. But if the override fails, there's not a combination and combining the towns together and
No,
Boylston getting a say to increase our levy limit. They don't have a voice. It's only Berlin that can raise their levy limit. Likewise, Boylston voters only can raise the Boylston levy limit.
right. Our budgets are tied in terms of percentage that we each pay. And, you know, one goes up, the other goes up, one goes down, the other goes down. However, how it's funded is up to the individual communities.
Right.
If that's a good way to explain it.
That's a really good set of questions.
Mhm.
Got them down. I'll do some digging.
Okay, any other topics?
That's it for tonight. No one's
Anybody
in
else have
contracts.
any questions?
No, I don't, Scott, you need a motion to adjourn.
Okay, yeah, motion to adjourn
Made.
and all those in favor?
Aye.